Hello, souls and demons, and welcome back. Today's story is written by RainElectric. And so with that, sit back, grip your seats, and enjoy the show. I noticed it first on a Monday, after an unusually brutal shift at work. Customers hounding me for refills, sauce on the side, extra napkins. You know how it is. That day was especially bad because I had one guy try the dollar bill trick on me. You know the one? He set out 5 ones and took away $1 every time I messed up or wasn't fast enough. I wasn't angry at him for taking any away, only that he expected me to bend over backwards for $5 fucking dollars. Get real. After dealing with all of that, the last thing I wanted to see on my way to the front door was a creepy old man staring at me. He had been my duplex neighbor for over 5 years. Most people wouldn't live in a duplex for so long, but we only shared one wall with each other, and he was always very timid. The only sounds I heard through that wall were his low humming to jazz tunes and the clinking of pots as he cooked. This was his daily routine after spending hours in the garden talking to his flowers. He was a little off, sure, but he was very sweet. He respected my privacy and never approached me aside from the occasional hello. Things changed a lot when his grandson moved in. Of the few conversations we've had, he had not once mentioned a family. That's why I thought it was strange to see a chalky, scruffy 20-something man dragging a suitcase into the unit beside me on a warm Wednesday afternoon. I didn't ask who he was, but when he saw me reclining on my patio chair, he perked up with a, "Oh, you must be my new neighbor. My name is Cameron." He told me all about how much he missed his grandfather after so many years, and how he was too elderly to be living alone. Something about him seemed off. I can't quite describe it. But it wasn't my business, so I brushed it off. Suddenly, I was seeing more and more of Cameron, and less of my elderly neighbor. He was no longer spending time in the garden. I could no longer hear the faint jazz through the walls. Instead, I heard whirring of tools every night, until 11 p.m. like a late-night remodel was happening next door. Honestly, it was so faint it never bothered me. At one point, those noises stopped too. And that's when I saw my elderly neighbor again. I stepped out of my car one day and began walking towards my front door, when I caught something in the corner of my eye. The sunlight was hitting my neighbor's window at the perfect angle, where I could hardly see anything but bright flooding yellow. I squinted hard to make out the shape. All I could see was a figure standing behind the window, perfectly still. I decided not to dwell on it too much and went inside. But something about that sent a chill down my spine and lingered in my thoughts. As I lay in bed, I still couldn't forget about it. The next day, I glanced over at my neighbor's window, but the curtains were drawn. Well, maybe it was my imagination, so I went off to work like usual. Once I came home, he was standing there staring, waiting behind his large glass window. His loose, draping skin accentuated by the fact that he was completely nude. He stared at me with hazy eyes and a sick expression on his face. It made me gag. I knew he was standing there for me. I had been coming home at the same time every day for years. I remained frozen, unsure of if I should head inside or get in my car and drive somewhere far away. In the end, I decided I may have been overreacting. Cameron had told me a few days prior that the old man was suffering from dementia, which worsened every day. I didn't want to do anything rash, especially since my sweet neighbor was sick. He probably wasn't standing there on purpose. I decided to let it go. But days turned into weeks, and the old man was waiting by the window every day. Even when I changed shifts, he was always there waiting. Sometimes, he was sitting on a satin chair with a cup of tea. But certain things remained the same, such as his naked, forever drooping skin and his hazy expression. Sometimes it felt like he grinned at me as I walked by. Nights felt uncomfortably cold as his loud breathing echoed through our shared wall. It felt as if he was always watching, even when he wasn't by the window. I never saw him come out of the house. I don't know if he ever left. Only Cameron would leave occasionally to gather groceries and come home whistling tunes on his way in. I tried to avoid looking at the old man as much as possible, but I noticed how sickly he became. Once, I leered a little longer near my door to see if he would turn to watch me leave. That day he was just standing there unmoving, his skin drooping almost to the floor. I don't know why I knocked on his door. I don't know if I was worried about him or fed up. I just knew I couldn't take much more of the staring. It was driving me crazy. It only took 2 knocks before Cameron opened the door. "Hey, Rye, what can I help you with?" he said nonchalantly. Rye. Only my friends call me Rye. Who does this guy think he is calling me that, when we've only exchanged a few sentences to each other? That really irritated me, and I became a little more aggressive. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." I was unwilling to hide the agitation in my voice. He whistled. "Now really isn't the time. Can I invite you over for dinner later?" "No, we need to talk now." I was beginning to push my way in when I stopped. I saw something in my peripheral that made my stomach turn. I looked up at Cameron, my fearful expression crystal clear in his dilated pupils. His breathing became heavy. He looked excited. He reached out to grab me, but I was too fast. I ran into my unit and tightly locked the door. With trembling fingers, I dialed 911. Thump, thump, thump. Cameron was hitting hard against our shared wall. "Come back. Let's have dinner." His muffled voice somehow carried into my living room. I tried to keep my composure, so I could describe to the 911 operator exactly what I saw at my neighbor's house. Once they informed me the police would arrive in 15 minutes, I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and huddled into a corner of my living room. Cameron was still pounding against the wall, repeating the same 5 words. After about 10 minutes, he stopped. Silence. Then I heard the creaking of the neighbor's back door. It's funny how many small sounds you can make out when your senses are in survival mode. I sat praying that he wouldn't try to come into my house. It was dark now, and the silence had filled with the chirping of crickets. My prayers were answered when I saw glaring red and blue lights approach our driveway. Loud knocking nearly made me jump out of my skin. I slowly approached the window and let out a sigh of relief when I saw the cops were standing there. I cautiously opened the door. "Ma'am, you called about some suspicious activity next door?" "My neighbor's skin," I whispered. The fear had managed to take my voice away to where I could barely speak. "What?" The policemen looked at each other in confusion. I pointed at the window attached to my neighbor's unit. Unlike other nights, the curtains were wide open and the silhouette of the old man's draping body stood behind the window. The police scurried over to the neighbor's unit and disappeared behind the door. I watched from the other side of the window as one of the policemen turned my elderly neighbor around. From my point of view, I could see all of the stitching on his back. A poorly sewn-on zipper adorned the center, so that his skin could be worn like a sick, repulsive costume. I couldn't take it anymore. I let out all the vomit I'd been holding back up to this point. The police didn't seem too pleased with their discovery either. Cameron, if that was even his real name, was never caught. I described him to the police, but his face was the type that didn't stand out at all. If I were to try to pick him out of a crowd, I'm not confident I could. He wasn't my neighbor's grandson, obviously. Sadly, my neighbor didn't have a family, but he seemed happy by himself up until, you know. I had seen the old man a few times after Cameron moved in, but he was acting strange. I wish I had paid attention back then. I don't blame myself, but I do feel regret for the way things turned out. One thing's for sure, though. I'm never living so close to a neighbor again.